can start, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all the participants. So we just start with the second session of third day webinar. So all these 3 days we had wonderful sessions. So now in this session we start with this session. So the topic of this session is introduction to computer vision and hands-on MATLAB with studies related to studies using AI and ML. So it will be taken by Dr. Vinay Kumar. So there's a leading engineer, Samsung Electromechanics Bangalore. So I'll just read out some is a brief profile for you. Uh, Vinay Kumar has got his master's by securing first rank. So his PhD from University of Mysore. He is currently working as a leading engineer at Samsung Electromechanics Bangalore. He has over 8 years of research experience, published numerous journals, articles. His major research interests include pattern recognition, image processing, symbolic data analysis, biometrics, etc. So he was awarded with the DST Inspire Fellowship for the year 2014. Uh, Apart from academics and research, so he conducts many quiz. He's active in other uh, uh, activities. So we were privileged to have you as a speaker for this session. Good afternoon, sir. Let's have a, a interesting session with you, sir. Uh, so it's over to you, sir. Please go ahead with the session, sir.
Thank you, Professor. It's my pleasure to be here as a part of this 1 week FDP program. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Professor, and thank you, Ma'am Ramya. And also, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of MRIT for being organized this continuous 1 week webinar on the much interesting topic on the ongoing era. And also, I would like to thank our senior researcher, Madam Punita, so offered me as a invitee in this wonderful webinar series on AI and machine learning. I also thank the Madam Punita. I think Madam Punita gave a wonderful session on machine learning in the first session. So in this session, so I'll be I can understand there is a session where you people get back from the lunch. I can understand the difficulty with which you're going to face. But no matter, I will promise you that there will be no boring sessions like only reading out sentences, nothing like that. There will be a much interesting session so that you come to know what actually the computer vision in an overview. And also, I will promise you that how we are going to solve with a visual cues, whether given an image or a video, or we are going to look at the given image or a given video for the recognition or detection purpose. So first of all, if we begin with our slides, so is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
It's visible, sir.
Okay. So is it? Am I going to second slide? Is it visible? This?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
Uh,
let's begin with today's topic, that is computer vision and overview. So before getting into the computer vision, let's start with some evolutionary approach, like how you people used to do certain problems, or how you people used to solve the problems in the earlier days. One of the days, how people used to do signature recognition and document recognition and flower recognition and face recognition. These are all the different kind of application. Where earlier, in general, it is called as a object recognition, where a human used to do all such kind of things, like a person who is very much, very well versed with a signature recognition. He used to do signature recognition, and a person who is well versed with the document recognition, and he is going to do a document recognition, and so on. So, but what is the difficulty with which he is facing? The efficiency is very low. That is the result with which the time with which he is going to take is much compared to what we are facing now. And the effort with which the human put in a lot of effort needs, as it needs to be very accurate, right? So the effort is also very high. And in terms of effectiveness, the effectiveness, obviously, it is varied. That depends on the human tendency. That is, its mood. Like if a person is very good in the morning, may not be very good in the afternoon, and may not be very good in the evening. So if he taken up a job of signature recognition or a document recognition in the morning, might be the effectiveness is very high. But if he taken up the same problem to solve it, the efficiency or the effectiveness might be very low. Why? Because the mood of the person depends on the time. So the effectiveness is varied in case of human. But how about the current era, like signature recognition, the same problems. If you want to do the same problems in the current era, we are not using a human. Instead, we are using a topic called Instead, we are using AI. The AI is nothing but an artificial intelligence. Dear participants, you just keep in your mind that we are not replacing a human by an artificial intelligence or a robot. This is just a supplementary tool which supports to the human, which reduces the efforts and also which increases the effectiveness and also which increases the efficiency of what a human used to do earlier. This is not, I'm repeatedly saying that this is not a replication or a replacement of a human. This is just a supplementary tool for a human to do a job very effectively and efficient. So now the efficiency will be improved. Like as AI includes the machines, so definitely the efficiency will be high, and also the effort will be very less, and effectiveness definitely it's a constant. As it's a kind of a machine, so definitely the effectiveness will be a constant rather than a varied. And this is called as a human intelligence. What earlier we used to do with the use of a human, and such an intelligence to solve a problem is what we call as a human intelligence. And if we call now what we are using right now, it is what we call it as artificial intelligence, where we are mimicking the task with which a human used to do earlier. And if you look at how human used to do, and if you look at even how human used to solve a given problem with this intelligence, with an example, like if I have an example, I have an example here. Like I have a flower. A human can easily recognize this as a flower. This is a kind of object. This is a given image. Human usually recognize in two ways. One is through memorization. The memorization means usually the children or likes to do recognition. It's just a kind of memorization, that is by reciting the features, by reciting the content of the given image. You used to do a memorization. The other one is comprehension. The comprehension is nothing but understanding the visual cues, in the given image. That is through a visual cues, one can either go for a memorization or one can go for a comprehension. But the advantage of comprehension is it is very effective. But the advantage of memorization, it can't be effective. That means if I give a rotated image or if I give a translated image, the person has got the capability in identifying only a image which has got it's already memorized, but he is not having the capability in identifying the flower which has got the rotated flower or a translated flower. This is what the drawback or a limitation of the method called memorization. Like, but in case of comprehension, you will do not only comprehend, you will do certain analysis, where in which certain analysis will be stored in the form of a knowledge base. That means either way, either memorization or a comprehension, these features with the help of visual cues, you will be stored in the knowledge base. That is our brain. So further, if we look at the same image or same object in real time, you used to do either through memorization or through comprehension. So this is how human intelligence works when you are going to recognize any objects or a video in matter. So if you look at the different components which helps human to do these tasks, like a recognition, detection, or a tracking.
ನೀನು ಕೆಳಗ್ ಚಾಪ ಹಾಕೊಂಡ್ ಕೂತ್ಕೊ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ.
Hello, any problem? Hello, hello. So if you look at the different components which helps human to do these kind of tasks, that is recognition, detection, or tracking, let us see what are the different components wherein which a human can get help from those different components. Like the major component is a human brain. It's a brain. And it requires a different sensory organs for recognizing or detecting the objects in the real world. Let us see what are the different sensory organs. That is eye, tongue, nose, ear. Eye for vision, tongue for taste, ear for sound, and nose for smell. So these are the different sensory organs which helps a human to identify, taste, and identify sound and smell the different items which are present in the real world. So these are the major components which helps in recognizing or detecting or tracking the different objects in the real world. But if you take only, as today's topic is all about a visionary object, so if you consider only with respect to eye, so let us see what are the different applications where in which eye is all related with. So if you consider only eye, that is only vision, the three different tasks the eye will do is, one is detection, the other one is recognition, that another is a tracking. First, let us define what is detection. Detection is nothing but given is a scene. So you have to identify whether the scene, like for example, it's a scene, you have to identify whether there is a human faces present in the given scene or not. That's what we call it as detection. So detection is nothing but identifying whether the given scene has got some object or not. The object is depending on the application dependent. Here the application dependent is identifying or detecting the human faces. Here in the given picture, I ask you people to identify the human faces. So after this, so definitely you're going to identify the human faces here. These are the human faces. Definitely identify. The next task is recognize. So after detecting the human faces, I will ask you to recognize these detected faces. That means these are all the persons who are belonging to Indian cricketers. So you can easily recognize by identifying or by getting the domain knowledge of the individual personality. So these two are the different tasks of a computer vision. That is, the one is the detection and the one is the recognition. The detection is nothing but identifying a given object in a given scene. Recognition is nothing but assigning a label to the detected object. Here, I will ask you to detect the human faces. So after detecting the human faces here, so if I ask you to name an individual detected face, means that's what we call it as recognition. Recognition means relearning. So the next task with which in computer vision is a tracking. So if you can see here, if I ask you to see what's happening, you can see easily track the ball. Like if I ask you to do that, just please track the ball. You can say that the ball is going here. So this is where computer vision or human vision is all about. Like it does detection, it does recognition, and it does tracking. So this is how a human intelligence works when it comes to, or when it compared against a artificial intelligence. If you can see the same intelligence, what we can mimic in the machine, let us see in the coming slides, like artificial intelligence. Like we are using a machine, the same object, but instead of memorization, we can use two different kind of engineering. One is handcrafted features and the one is automatic feature engineering. The handcrafted features are nothing but you have to select couple of a visual feature wherein which that visual feature helps you to or drive you towards the solution. The solution is identifying a given object. So here the handcrafted feature, either it might be text features or it might be edge features. And automatic feature engineering is nothing but given it's in an image, the system automatically identify the relative features and it does a classification or a detection. So here also the visual cues plays a major role in extracting the handcrafted features, and also the visual cues plays a major role in extracting the automatic features for detection and recognition. Obviously, we use the same steps. It will store into the knowledge base for further classification. If you look at the different components related with a machine, like here, instead of brain, we call our brain as artificial intelligence. So you can see the machine sensors, different machine sensors for eye, tongue, ear, and a nose. Eye for vision, tongue for taste, ear for sound, and nose for smell. Here, these are all the different components of a machine which is used for visionary objects, identifying visionary objects, and these are all the different machine or different components wherein which it is used to recognize the sounds. And this is one sensor wherein which it identifies the taste of a rice. This is one of the machine developed by Japan, where this machine used to identify the taste of a rice, raw rice. And here, this is the sensor which is used to smell the bomb. And this is a kind of a sensor which is used to smell the what you can say LPG gas. So these are all the developments happened in artificial intelligence and machine learning. But you can say our brain is not only filled with only artificial intelligence, but also it includes two other components. The one component is a machine learning. The other component is a deep learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and machine learning is another subset of artificial intelligence. That means what we are doing in the current era is we are trying to mimic as human used to do to solve a problem with the help of machine learning as well as deep learning. Machine learning is kind of a classical kind of method which we used to follow earlier in the 90s or 2000s. But when it comes to deep learning, or even earlier we used to do deep learning, but with a limited number of infrastructure. In the 98s and the early 98s and 2000, some people used to do or some people used to propose certain algorithms for the deep learning, but there was a shortage of hardware. But now it's not a matter. Like as the Nvidia is growing, I was reading some articles yesterday or day before yesterday that Nvidia is much bigger than now Intel. That is the hardware, the GPU processing is now incorporated or getting more higher intention than a CPU. That is the CPU developers is Intel and the GPU developers is Nvidia. Now the gross income of GPU developers, NVIDIA is much greater than CPU developers called as Intel. That means you can see the variety of the GPUs were building. So because of such a increase in the infrastructure, the deep learning is getting boomed nowadays, and deep learning is getting very much interested across the research communities. And also, one thing you can make sure that whatever we are doing a training process, that is completely in the offline process. You can take 1 month or 2 months for training, but when it comes to a deployment to the machine, it's kind of the inference time is always a fraction of a second. That means you can go with identifying or recognizing or tracking any given object in the scene. It can be done only within a fraction of a second. That's what we call it as it's a real time inference. Inference is always done at the real time, but the training is always done at the offline. So hence one can go for training up to 1 month or 2 months, not for even matter for if you are using CPU, you can go half a month. Like you can train a different kind of images for 6 months to 7 months, but you can do inference within a fraction of a second. So this is all about training and inferencing by keeping in mind of machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence. If you look at today's topic, it's all about visionary, that is I. So if you look at the different tasks of computer vision, as I already mentioned, with human vision, it will do detection, tracking, and recognition. Here also we have three different same tasks, that is detection, recognition, and tracking. So given is an object, the detection is nothing but it give you the region of interest. That is, here are three different objects. One is remote, another one is a cup, another one is scissors. That means given is an image consisting of a remote, cup, and a scissors, my algorithm will give you a region of interest of remote, cup, and a scissors. This is what we call it as identifying the ROI of a given object is what we call it as detecting or detection. So this is done with a computer vision algorithms. Our next target is to recognize. That means after identifying the given object, we need to label it. We have to label it. That's what we call as labeling. That is remote, cup, and scissors. This is the output given by one of the algorithm, and here you can see there the percentage with which it is going to recognizing. That means 79% of it is saying it as a remote, and 96% it is saying it as a cup, and scissors it is saying it as a 99%. That means it is not saying accurately. That means even though it is identifying or recognizing it as a scissors, cup, and a remote. It has got some confusion over the other object. It has got same visual characteristics. So if it comes to the tracking, let us see how a computer vision algorithm helps in performing the tracking. See here, I have a video here where I have a playing football video. See here, have anchors. I'm selecting the anchor for a particular person. See there, it detects and it is going to be tracked. That means here a football player is there. He is moving and it tracks accordingly. See here, similarly, it is selecting the different cars. See, as the car moves on, the objects, the bounding box also getting moved. This is what we call it as tracking. This is what we call it as tracking. See here, the anchor has been put for different persons in the given football video, and you can observe there the bounding box is moving relative to the position of the detected object. This is what the real-time computer vision application in detecting, recognizing, and tracking the objects in a video. Here, dear participants, you can easily observe that here the applications of computer vision can be categorized in two different ways. One is for a spatial domain applications, and the one is temporal domain applications. The spatial domain application includes only images, and the temporal domain applications includes it includes not only image but extra dimension is at time. That means it includes both spatial as well as temporal information. So computer vision application can be categorized into either spatial domain applications and the temporal domain applications. So spatial domain includes image and temporal domain includes video. Under spatial, can detect, recognize, only two things can be done. But under video, we can do all the three, that is detection, recognition, and tracking. But one can see these things happen not only because of computer vision. There is one more thing which helps computer vision to do detection, recognition, and track. The other thing is what is called as image processing. Actually, the different, some people have a confusion that both computer vision and image processing are one and the same, but it's completely a wrong intuition. The computer vision is the one in which it identify the visual cues and it will give you the output as features in the form of a real number. But in case of image processing, the input is also an image and the output is also an image. That means if I want to enhance a given image, the input image is a less enhanced image and the output image will be a high enhanced image. If I want to reduce the enhance, or if I want to reduce the, if I want to blur the given image, the input image is original image and the output image will be the blurred image. That means you should keep in your mind that the image processing is all about, it will do, or whatever the operation it is doing, it is performing, the output is also an image. But in case of computer vision, it's not like that. It will capture the visual information and will give you in the form of descriptors. So let us discuss the popular visual descriptors. I'm not giving any for mathematics behind it. I'm just listing out what all the visual descriptors available in the literature. And we are categorized into handcrafted as well as deep learning methods, where handcrafted feature, as I already said, that this can be identified by the users depending on the application, and also deep learning methods, it can be done automatically. The features can be extracted automatically, and also these methods can be used depending on the applications. If you look at what are the different descriptors used under handcrafted features, one is shift, the surf, brisk, MSER, HOG, LBP, and Kalman filter. Like the shift can be used, that is it's also a kind of a shift feature is called as scale invariant feature transform. So these are all the features. The first, shift, surf, brisk, MSER, OG, LBP, and these feature descriptors are used for both the detection as well as recognition. But last, the Kalman filter is used for tracking the given objects. The different descriptors of deep learning methods are, one is faster RCNN, the other one is single shot detection, yet another is YOLO. The under YOLO, we can have a couple of variants like Inception 1 V1 and Inception V2 and Inception V3, where these Inception V1 V2 are used for the detection and tracking of the respective objects depending on the applications you are going to use. So for references, you can go through these links. You're going to get the different technical details of these descriptors, but I'm sharing the same image what I shared earlier. Here now we can say the handcrafted feature mechanism as a classical machine learning and automatic feature engineering as a deep learning. That means whatever artificial intelligence used for identifying identifying given object can be categorized as that can be done through classical machine learning approaches, or that can be done with the deep learning approaches. That is here, classical machine learning includes these handcrafted features, and deep learning methods includes these different methods for detection, recognition, and tracking. So apart from the application, what I shown there, detection and recognition, there are some more applications related to computer vision. So I will just I will give a detailed explanation or a brief explanation about the applications here. That is, if I touch upon the first application is ADAS. That is, ADAS is Automatic Driver Assistance System. So the major computer vision application lies in ADAS is identifying the distance between the two cars, or identifying whether the pedestrian is moving, and identifying whether the two different cars were going left or right. So this is what the major application of computer vision helps in designing a car without any driver. That is what Uber is already done, and that is what Google is already done. So where automatic driver assistance system help you out in driving a car without any human intervention. This is what the first application. And the second application is optical character recognition. The OCR, I think you already, everyone knows, those who are into the research, everyone knows that the optical character recognition is nothing but given as a document or given as an image. So we have to identify the given characters present in the given image. So this helps in identifying or converting a given image into a text document. And further, if you go for a surveillance, the surveillance is nothing but identifying a behavior of a person who is moving around, and also it helps in monitoring the person's behavior. That means if I adopt this surveillance system in any public places, that monitoring system helps a police person to identifying the good behavior or not a good behavior. That means identifying the criminal kind of things. This kind of application will help you out in identifying the behavior of a person. So coming into the next application, that is machine inspection. So as I am coming from Samsung Electromechanics, so we usually concentrate on such kind of application with a computer vision. That is, given is an image, a chip image or a defect chip image. So we usually try to identify the defects present in the given chip image. That means here the problem is, or the task is to, given as a chip image, we have to identify the defect present in a chip image. Using computer vision algorithms, we usually recognize the defects present in a chip, and we will tell, or we will ask the user to discard this chip and only use the OK chip. We will consider OK and NG. OK means good, NG means not good. So we categorize into two different chips, that is OK chip and a NG chip. This is how a computer vision helps in doing a categorization either as a good chip or a not a good chip in a machine inspection. So coming into the next application, match move. I think anybody have know what is match move. I need response from your side. You can ping in the group if anybody knows what is actually match move.
Yeah, you can respond to the speaker or then the chat window.
Okay, if nobody knows, I think many of the people have seen. Well, somebody is saying correct. Many of the people have seen the movie called Bahubali, and many films are adapting this kind of technology, like Kurukshetra, for example, in Kannada film. So they have adopted this match move technology that is creating a virtual environment or simulating environment as a real environment. Like You can see here, here is the original environment, that is the background is completely green, and these two people are standing here. After applying a match move, you can see here, this is the output of the match move. That means they are standing in front of some idol here. So this is what the output of the match move. But originally, strictly speaking, they are standing in front of the green background. This is where the current technology, where the movie industry have been adapted for creating such a huge pictures or such a huge environment for visualizing or creating a virtual reality for the user. That is whatever the movies currently coming like Kurukshetra or Bahubali, they have used such a kind of match move technology for creating a virtual environment with bigger pictures. I think everyone got this. This is what the huge applications of a computer vision, and also nowadays you can hear about that VFX and digital intermediate. So these are all the different applications like digital intermediate and VFX and match move, and these are all the a couple of applications where computer vision is mainly adapted, and also these things have been integrated as a whole system. That's why the current trend and the current researchers and also the budding technocrats are fond of these machine learning, computer vision, and deep learning. So if you get into the next application, the medical image diagnosis, as you can see, the current scenario is a very good example for a medical diagnosis. If I have a tool wherein with the tool have the capability in recognizing, detecting, recognizing the given medical X-ray as whether the X-ray consisting of a good or a not good, or whether there is a defect in the X-ray image component, or whether the X-ray is completely without any defect. So here you can see here the red indicates it has got highly affected. The green indicates less affected. The blue indicates no affected area. This is what we call as a heat map. The heat map is nothing but it's a kind of highlighting or visualizing the region of our interest depending on the density. That means here you can see here the density of the affected region is very high. Here the density of the affected region is relatively low. Here the density of the affected region is relatively low compared to this region. This is what we call it as a heat map. Even this heat map can be, I think if you observed or if you can see the cricket matches, the pitch map, I think most of the people have seen the pitch map. In the pitch map, you're going to look at the heat map. That means how a bowler used to bowl, given as 10 overs, out of 10 overs or out of 60 deliveries he bowls, what is the maximum amount of ball he plays in the Yorker, or what is the maximum amount of balls he plays in the short pitch, and what is the maximum amount of ball which he plays in the short ball. So the number of balls, like 30 will be the Yorker, 60 out of 30 means so maximum half of the deliveries he bowls in the Yorker. The density of the Yorker region will be highlighted more compared to other region. This is what we call as heat map. Heat map is nothing but highlighting the more denser areas for correctly recognizing the region of our interest. So this is how the computer vision plays a major role in identifying a defect or a non-defect in a given medical X-ray image. So this comes to motion capture. This is completely depending on the physical angular representation of the given image. That means if given is a video or given is an image, I wanted to calculate the different angles or different mode with which you are going to do. That means definitely these applications is very useful in a sports. Like if I want to capture the motion of a given bowler or a given pitcher, so you can see in this image here it is calculating the different angles between this leg and different angle between this arm and different angle with which he is standing. That means if I want to prove or if you want to match against a proper rule, that means you can see there is a proper rule for playing a cricket or for playing a American baseball. So to match against a perfect rule, so we usually adapt such a motion capturing mechanism. It will definitely reduce the time, even if we go for a human intervention. So to avoid such human intervention, so we usually adapt such kind of motion capturing mechanism. So coming into the last application of computer vision, not last, we have mentioned only few of them. There's a lot of applications present, but major of the applications are mentioned here. The other one is biometrics. As you all know, the biometrics, many biometric types are available. That is fingerprints, palm print, iris, face, keystrokes. There are lot many biometrics available. These biometrics are usually used for person authentication. Actually, instead of earlier days, we used to do PIN, password, or a token-based authentication. So to avoid such a PIN, password, or a token, we have gradually adapting into biometric kind of a person authentication. I think many of the people are having smartphones, switching into face biometric authentication or a fingerprint biometric authentication. Rather, compared to earlier days, we used to do either a password-based authentication or a pattern-based authentication. In kind of a biometric-based authentication, we usually does a computer vision by getting the visual features of fingerprints, and those fingerprints, first we have to identify whether the fingerprint belongs to particular person or not. That is what we call identification of a person's fingerprint. So in the biometrics, usually we have two different stages. One is identification and the one is verification. In the identification, we usually match one versus all. That means extracting the visual features of the given fingerprint or extracting the visual features of the given face images and comparing against the features which are already present in the knowledge base. After climbing the identity of a fingerprint, then we do verification. That's what the bank persons will do. Like while creating a bank account, they will ask for three different specimen signatures. That is, these three specimen signature will be stored as a template in the knowledge base. As soon as you are going to sign it in a checkbook, this checkbook is fitted against the signature which is already available in the database, and if it matches, then only they will accept that check as a valid check. Otherwise, definitely you will get a call from a bank that your check is not valid. So this can be happened in a temporal time, like after 6 months or after 1 year or 2 years, definitely your signature will be varied. Even then, definitely you will get a call from a bank that your signature is not matching. That means these biometrics, the limitation of biometrics, some of the biometrics, it varied with respect to time. That means even if you can take even with a fingerprint, and also if you can take with respect to a signature, it varies with respect to time. So that's why you should have a awareness of changing your signature or giving a specimen of a signature to the bank either twice in a year or 2 times in biannual. So this is all about the different applications of computer vision. But if you can go with, you can ask the question, sir, how can we do or how can we use these computer vision application for a beginner? Like I'm not aware of these descriptors, I'm not aware of any tools with which I'm going to develop these kinds of applications for with the use of computer vision. So I will be telling what are the different tools available for developing the computer vision algorithms. So these are the different tools, even for the beginners or for developers. Like it's like these are all the programming language which uses these computer vision libraries. So this is what we call it as an OpenCV library, which is free of cost. One can use and they can use it in their respective programming language. Like Python can be used with the OpenCV and MATLAB. Even MATLAB can use the OpenCV library, and C++ can be used with the OpenCV library, and also C and also Java. But one thing you should make sure that you should have a proper OpenCV library, and it is built with the CMake compiler. That depends on the platform. You can't say straight away you can't download and straight away you can't use it in a straight away. But there's a couple of steps need to be followed for integrating OpenCV library in the respective programming language. But when it comes to developers, there are many. There are almost 20 to 30 tools available for developing the computer vision algorithms. So here, these are the couple of OpenCV or a computer vision libraries. This, as I already mentioned, this OpenCV is one kind of a library. This is SimpleCV, and this is TensorFlow, and this Scikit-Image, and it's a PyTorch. These are the couple of libraries available for developing the computer vision algorithms. And one can see in the right hand side, this is completely different from libraries and is what we call it as platform. Amazon Web Service, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Services. So these are three different platforms where you can use a computer vision algorithm as a platform. That means here these are the open libraries, but these are not libraries. Instead, these are on the platforms where you can use straight away can use the computer vision libraries. So coming in, I think if you have any questions, so I can take your questions. Then I can go back with the demo.
So before going to demo, shall we ask the participant to post questions so that you can answer them?
Definitely. That's what I said. So I'm ready to ask. I'm ready to go for questions.
Okay, then I'll pose the question. So there's one question. Is it PyTorch and TensorFlow, are they same?
No, sir. Those two are different libraries, wherein which PyTorch is developed by Facebook and TensorFlow is developed by Google.
There's one more question, sir. How libraries are selected based on application?
So there is like libraries selection based on the application. As I already mentioned, these libraries can be used for as a beginners. Like if you are a beginner in a computer vision application, so you can go with your language of your interest. Like if you are familiar with Python, you can go with the Python. If you're familiar with MATLAB, you can go with the MATLAB. Or if you're familiar with the C programming, you can go with C programming. Or if you're familiar with either of the languages, C++ or Java, you can go with that. But whenever you are going to include a library, definitely it is very easy to include OpenCV as a preferable library for developing a computer vision applications. There is no specific libraries for specific application. All libraries will provide all the tools.
So there's supposed to be one general question.
Yes.
Yeah, from where the training set for testing the application available? Like where do we get the training set for testing the application? Where it will be available?
I didn't get you actually. For which application?
That's what the application they are not mentioned. Maybe like where do you get a training set for a particular application? Maybe.
Okay. I will tell you. I will tell you the scenario. Actually, I will take the same banking application. Like the training set is nothing but what you people you used to give as a training specimen signature. That the three specimen signature what you used to give while opening an account. Those three signature will be used as a training set. But when it comes to a testing set, the testing set is a realistic data or unseen data way that can be provided in the form of a signature written in check, either in the check or either in any of the form. That means if you are going to give an application to the bank and you made your signature, and the banking people has to compare your signature against the signature which is already present in the database. So this is how the testing set will be provided.
Yeah. One more question, sir. Is it computer vision is not possible without OpenCV? Can we program without OpenCV library?
Yeah. You can. That's what I mentioned here. You can use simple CV. You can use Scikit. You can use TensorFlow. Even in our company, we have a project we're working on identifying or the defects of a given image. Even we have two kinds of mechanism augmentation. That is, we use for augmentation we use OpenCV based augmentation, and we use TensorFlow based augmentation. For augmentation, is nothing but creating more images for training. That is, image with as shown here. I have a sunflower image, so but my mind can have only an image with a straightened sunflower. But if my mind see an image with a translated version of a sunflower, my mind may not be able to identify that as a sunflower. Or my mind, if I given you a 90-degree rotated version of a sunflower, my mind may not be in a position to say or position to recognize it as a sunflower. So for that reason, we used to do augmentation. Augmentation uses 90-degree rotation, flipping, translation. These things can be done either through a computer vision tools or through TensorFlow tools. So in our company, we use both OpenCV as well as TensorFlow tools for performing translation or augmentation.
Okay, there is one more question, sir. Any benchmark data repository is available for evaluating our computer vision algorithms? Are there any?
Definitely. There are a couple of many more benchmarking data sets available. Actually, please keep in your mind what do you mean by actually benchmark. I think I will pose a question for you people. Actually, you should aware of what you mean by benchmark. Even you can create a benchmark data set. Benchmark data sets is nothing but, so one can create a large number. One can first set a application. One can set an application in the domain, like for example, face recognition. If I set my application as a face recognition, so I will search for a benchmarking data set. If I don't get a benchmarking data set for my application, I can even create my own data set, but I can't call my data set as a benchmark. Then what do you mean by benchmark data set? Benchmark data set is nothing but a data set has to be shared across publicly, and that publicly data sets can be taken from other participants, and they have to code their best results. That means we are benchmarking the results on the given data set, where those data sets can be publicly available, and also those results are quoted in the literature. And based on the results, they can include the same data set for their application. So similarly, I will share you the link of Caltech database, where it has got a 101 classification data set, 101 classes data set. They can use it for classification purpose.
So one more question from my side.
Yeah, sir.
The color space used in Photoshop is somewhat more compared to MATLAB. So the pixel values what you represent in Photoshop, when you bring it to MATLAB environment, there will be slight difference there in the pixel values.
Correct.
So then, if the algorithm has to work for that Photoshop sort of a pictures, how do we prove that in MATLAB?
So what you are saying is we will be having different color spaces, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to handling with color spaces, so we will we will recommend you for a normalization. We will ask you for the whatever the color space it will be, the intensity shall be converted into a normalized image, where the normalized image will give you information of a object presence or absence in a given image. That means image normalization can help you out in giving a common image irrespective of the image space.
But it's true that when you bring it from a WhatsApp to MATLAB, there will be change in the exactly.
Definitely. Because WhatsApp will do compression, image compression, so that original image can't be done at the same time, because we need a faster transform of source to destination, right? Because of that, we do prefer with a lossy compression. When it comes to lossy compression, definitely the quality of the image will be reduced.
Okay. Take the last question so that we can go with the hands-on.
Sure.
Generally, in computer vision for real-time analysis, training require too much time. If we switch to GPU, will the training time get reduced? For example, fingerprints images are face detection in video.
Correct.
Like generally, if you use real-time images, it's going to take so much of a processing time. So, how do we tackle that with GPU? Will GPU be better?
Yeah, normally, strictly speaking, that all depends on the infrastructure which you are going to set up for your application. Actually, as I already mentioned in my speech, the training is completely offline. You can use either a GPU or a CPU. When it comes to model saving, you should be keeping in mind that whatever you're saving the model, there are a couple of inferencing mechanism in the current literature where you can get the result within a fraction of millisecond. There's a concept called TensorRT. I think many of them are heard or not heard. I don't know. So in the company, many of the companies are using a concept called TensorRT for inferencing. Even though it is very, very, very faster than a common inferencing. Like a common inferencing uses like 5 seconds for inferencing 1 lakh image, but TensorRT will do the same thing in 3 seconds. That's the advantages of using the TensorRT. Like what I recommend is, so going for training, irrespective of the infrastructure available for the application, no matter what it is, but going for the inference, what it matters a lot.
Sir, we have one last question, so we'll take it.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any other algorithm for tracking other than Kalman filter?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not related to computer vision domain, but still, how do we predict the position other than Kalman filter?
Yeah, definitely. There are other couple of algorithms for tracking. So I will mention. I will list out. I will give you what are the different algorithms I will mention.
Okay, so then we start with the. If you're comfortable, you can start with the hands-on. We
As you
already
can see. Okay, fine. As you can see, Kalman filter is nothing but a special operation if you perform. So you can adapt or you can use different filters. In place of Kalman filters, you can use different kernels performing the same operation. The operation is same. Actually, the tracking operation will remain same, but the Kalman filter will give you information what actually you are going to identify an object. So instead of Kalman filter, you can use any general filters wherein which it uses some visual information for tracking. The tracking algorithm is completely different. The Kalman filter helps you to identifying the region of your interest. Is it fine, Professor? Hello.
yes, sir.
Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So
before getting into my demo, I think I wanted to show some useful information that is prerequisite for my demo.
okay.
They have to know all these things like steps of machine learning. They have to know both. They need to understand what is the difference between training and testing. In the training stage, we usually have a data and we do data analysis and data visualization. I think you people know that nowadays the boom or a trend is not for a feature engineering engineer, but the requirement is for a data engineer or data scientist. That means we have a couple of tremendous tools like deep learning cognition, deep cognition, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Platform. There are a couple of many tools available for the analysis or visualization, but now we need an engineer. Where an engineer has the capability in analyzing the data and also he has to segregate the data for the specific application. That's why the companies are in need of an engineer who does all this, and such a person is what we call it as a data engineer or a data scientist. So now in the future, we will be having an era where data plays a major role. That we are not having like earlier in our research days, if we develop an algorithm which extract a very good features for recognition purpose, so that's all about you are a very good learner. But nowadays or in the future era, there will be nothing like that. We have already ready-made food is available or ready-made tool is available, but we have to do a data segregation, data annotation, and data analysis. If we get a person who does all this, then it's a very better, and we call him as a data engineer or a data scientist. And here in the machine learning, in the training steps, we used to have a data, and we does analysis, and also we do a visualization. Further, we do feature engineering. Here we represent the feature either in the form of a set or in the form of a vector. Then we perform feature selection and a feature extraction, and then we do a modeling, that is validation through either k-fold, two-fold, or LOCV. Mr. Professor? Hello? Hello, Professor Velu.
Ah,
I think some of the participants asked the question, right? That is, how can you segregate the training and testing set?
yeah.
And what are the crux behind testing set and a training set? Even, but at the time, now I will answer actually this question. Right. For example, if you have a training set, I wanted to evaluate the performance of the perform model so that the evaluation can be done. I can be one of the following methods like k-fold cross validation or two-fold cross validation or a lever node cross validation. By using these cross validation technique, one can evaluate the training set without getting into the testing data set. That means it's just like I just give you an analogy like if you want to hire a person or if you want to give any people or like if you're doing function, so if you want to assign a person who perform food very well, but you don't know about who is going to do food very well. At that time, what you will do, you just go for different contractors, that food contractors. So you just ask for a test. It means you will ask for a test, but those tests need not be of original taste with which your function will be preparing. That means while going for the different food contractors, you are meeting the different contractors. But actually, that is a time of a training. That is what I mean is you will be having a kind of a data set. Those data set are a scene data set. While in the training data set, you will just divide the data set into training and the validation set. Those validation set actually acts as a testing data set during classification. That means I have a data set, I divide the data set into training and testing. Testing is considered as an unseen data set, and for a training, again under training, I will divide the training data set into training and a validation. This validation data set is used to validate the proposed model. That's what you can use either of the strategies for validating the proposed model. In the testing, even we have a data and analysis and also visualization, but in the feature engineering, we don't use any feature selection. Instead of it, during training, we usually store or preserve the features which is already selected, and those feature indices will be used during testing and performs classification. This is what the difference between training and testing. If we go for a demo now, so I will show you how to classify three different objects, which is a subset of a Caltech 101 data set. I have three different data set, three class data here. One is aeroplane. The other one is anchor. One more is camera. So these are the three class data set I have taken as a subset from the Caltech 201, sorry, Caltech 101 dataset. So now I'm using this dataset for classifying the given image either into aeroplane, anchor, or a camera. So for feature extraction, I will be using three different features. One is LBP, local binary pattern. Second one is GLCM. Professor, is it visible?
Yeah, it's a little bit if you zoom it because the font will be very
Okay.
small.
Okay, fine. I think these programs have been shared across the participants, right?
Yes, sir, it's already shared.
Okay. Hello, Professor.
Yes, sir.
Is it visible now?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, fine. So here, as I already mentioned, so I have a 3 different data set wherein which I need to perform a classification using visual features called as LBP, a GLCM, and a fusion of these GLCM. It's just a simple fusion. It's a concatenation of these two features. So here you can use the feature index like 1, 2, or if you have every participants have opened the same program, either you can use 1, 2, or 3 for the respective feature extraction mechanism. So I just execute the code one by one. So CLC is used for clearing the command window, and clear all is used to clear all the variables present in the workspace. This is the workspace. Currently it is empty now. And as soon as I run the program, you can observe carefully, you can see the variables. I'm running this code. For running the code, just select and press F9. Press F9, you are going to be run. So you can see here, there are totally 889 images are present in the folder of dataset. See here. So it's a data store variable. In the MATLAB, this data type, data structure is called as data store, where this data store consisting of file names, read size, labels, and also read function. This is called a decorator. So here it is a category. What are the categories? See here, you can see here aeroplanes. You can see the aeroplanes. Anchor, and also camera. One can observe carefully here. The number of images in the airplanes is maximum compared to the remaining two classes of images. That is here, one can question that there's an imbalance in the number of samples present in each category. So that will give you weird results. That's what engineer or researcher who is doing the research, if there is an imbalance set of samples present in a given data set. This is what a data engineer will do. That means given is a data set which has got imbalance set of samples present in different classes, what they can do, or what we usually recommend is we go for augmentation. That is, we set a number, we set for a class which has got a maximum number of samples, and we take that length of the maximum number of samples present in a given particular class, and we just augment as many number of images where the lesser number of classes will equal to the number of images which has got higher samples in the entire data set. That's what we call as augmentation. Here you can perform augmentation, but in our demo, I'm not showing you the augmentation kind of things. So here, as I already given the feature index as 1, I will be using a LBPV feature for extraction. You just select it and press F9. So you're going to get one more variable called feature index. So now here one can see here there is a for loop running from 0.3 to 0.7 in steps of 20. That means that I am doing a training for the entire data set. Initially I do training for 30%. For next I do the training for 50%. Subsequently I do training for 70% of training data. That means here this indicates that 0.3 starting from the 0.3 up to 0.7 in steps of 0.2. That means in steps of 0.2 means initially it is 0.3, later on it is 0.5, and at last it is 0.7. So here I will divide the data set into training and testing as 30-70, 50-50, and 70. That it is going into the loop. Also, I'm splitting the data set randomly. I'm not doing any strict sequential splitting. I'm instead of doing random splitting with the use of this image data store. So if I give this to 0.3, just select it and give F9, train test percent is 0.3, and just run this codes. So you can see here the test level has been divided and training level is also divided. And you can see here the training set contains 268, and this 268 will have to match with the label present over here. I just clear this.
Sir, one doubt.
Yes,
So
sir.
this, yeah, local binary pattern. So while extracting a features, so
Yeah.
do you use some sort of a overlapping blocks, or some block size 8x8, or like you divide the image into blocks and then you apply LBP? Then how much is the feature vector?
No,
Like,
I'm applying for complete entire image. I'm resizing the image into 256 cross 256, and then I'm
uh-huh.
applying completely with a radius of 1.
Okay, then you will take it as a one single row vector, that entire.
Correct.
So it will be like 65,556 into one row.
Correct.
Okay.
So those who are doing the same in your system, so please one request is you have to change your path for saving the feature matrices. Here I'm having the path of my laptop, so please replace this complete path from year to year, like from year to year. You just replace your respective paths so that it will be helpful for you people to run the same code in your respective laptops or desktops. See, I just run this, so it will take some amount of time for running and saving it. Select, just press F9. So you can see here in the command window, 30% training GLCM feature extraction of sample to 65 is done. It means it is done with a training, that is a feature extraction. You can see the output here. Where you can see the output means 30% demo feature matrix GLCM 30%. Right. For GLC. Sorry, as this is inside a loop, it has to be ended actually. So I just run it one more time. So here the features for both testing and training images have been computed. Are you able to save the feature matrix, dear participants? I need a response from your side. Hello. Okay, fine. Yeah, it is saved actually. Yeah, it is saved. You can see here it is saved for different percentage of data set for LBP. Okay, I thought it is GLCM. Okay, it is LBP. So now, dear participants, you can now you just change the feature index from 2 to 1 to 2, so that it will compute you the GLCM features. So just do only one change. Just change 1 to 2 and just run the same code, so that you are going to get the GLCM features in the respective folder. Like here in the GLCM folder, you are going to get the training and testing feature matrix. See here, this is the feature matrix of trained images. Yeah, see here, now the training feature matrix and testing feature matrix is ready of GLCM visual features, that's the texture features, and now it is computing the data set with which we divide a data set 50-50. That's what it is computing with 50% training and 50% testing. So now we have got with training feature matrix. So here the division is not an entire data set, that is 50-50 or 30-70 or 70-30 is not on complete data set, but instead we usually divide 30% of training set per class. That is, if I have a class of 70 or 10 and a 10, we usually divide 30% of 70 samples and 30% out of 10 samples and 30% out of again 10 samples. We are not considering the percentage at a whole. Instead, we divide it based on individual classes. So I have got both this 50-50 train and test feature matrix. And now yeah, now there's computation of 70-30. Yeah, now feature extraction is completed, I think. Yeah, the feature extraction is completed. So dear participants, if we can go with another script called as a classification, here we are using a SVM classifier. As one can see that SVM classifier plays a very good role when you have got a very limited number of samples for classification. So it plays a very good classification accuracy, or it will give you provide you a very good classification accuracy, and it will also converge at very good rate. Here, yeah, I have used both SVM and KNN classifier. So for classification index, either you can use one for SVM or two for KNN. And similarly, if you want to do classification for LBP, you can use one. And if you want to do classification for GLCM, you can use two. Or if you want to do classification for fusion of features, you can use either of it. So after this, so what we are using here is for validating the results. Here we are using a confusion matrix. Out of from the confusion matrix, we are using a class-wise precision, class-wise recall, and a class-wise F measure. And finally, we are going to get accuracy, recall, precision, and a F measure to evaluate the proposed model for classification of aeroplanes, anchor, and a car. So if I just click on, I have selected feature index as 1, that is LBP feature, and I have selected a classifier as SVM classifier. So before that, I just clear up my workspace and also command window. I just run this triangle. Now you can see here from the extracted feature, it will take it and it will compare against yeah, see here. So this is what the result we achieved for 70-30 here. It's a confusion matrix obtained for 70-30, that is out of the samples present in the test data set for 70-30 split. 70-30 split, you can see here clearly the complete out of 240 is categorized as airplane only. See here, what is that class? Class 1. Class 1 is airplane, class 2 is anchor, and class 3 is camera. Out of 240 test data set, it is categorized 240, and out of 13, it is categorized only 3. Anchor has been confusion with the first class, and out of 15, completely categorized as first class. So this is what the drawback when you have got that is what you can call it as imbalanced data set. That means so you can see these instances when we are facing in solving the real-time application. So this is what we call it as a bias class. That is when we have got a class with a huge number of samples, but the remaining classes will be having only a lesser number of samples. At that time, the results will be, as I already mentioned earlier, this is what we call it as weird results. So you are ending up in getting the weird results. So to overcome this, you just go ahead with using data augmentation, where that will give you a balanced class. So you see here, why we won't prefer accuracy over other evaluation measure, because see, the accuracy is saying that 90% of the classification is correct. That is, but you can see here, only first class has been properly categorized when we are dividing the data set into 70 and 30, 70 training and 30 testing. But out of the remaining classes, most of them classes have been not properly classified. But even though those not properly classified, the system's accuracy is giving you 90%. But this is not the proper way of judging the trained model. So one cannot claim their accuracy is the ultimate way of validating the given model, when especially when you having such a kind of imbalanced data set. It means whenever if you're having an imbalanced data set, accuracy is not the measure, it's not a good measure to measure the goodness of the proposed model. So instead of that, we recommend you to use either recall, precision, or a F measure, either of the measures for evaluating the goodness of the system of classification. So here one can use, for the same feature set, one can use a different classifier called KNN with 2. So if I can use this 2, if I run this, so this is the results what I obtained. One can see here, this is the confusion matrix obtained for with the KNN classification. See, out of 240, I am obtained with the 236 as a correct classification. Out of 12 at 13, I am obtained with the 9 as a correct perfect classification. Out of 15, I am correctly classifying. And that means here we can observe carefully that even though the features are same, but we are ending up in getting the good results with respect to KNN classification. That means we can say that it also matters with how the data feature points clearly placed in the feature space. It means here, particularly strictly speaking, KNN classification, it completely works based on the nearest neighbor approach. But when it comes to SVM classifier, it particularly works based on the discriminant based classification. That means when you have a sample which is very much closer for the distribution of one class to the other class, in that scenarios, the SVM is going to be will be having a very limited amount of space for classification. That means here if one can clearly observe the KNN is performing better than SVM here in categorizing the 3 different classes. And you can use the defined feature index. Instead of 1, you can give 2. And also, the dear participants, you can see here, the results can be saved in the form of matrices. See, the respective results are saved, final result and confusion matrix for the respective 3070. One can see here, and also visualize the same in MATLAB window. See, you can see, and take this 3070. You can clear the workspace accordingly. If you want to see this confusion matrix, just double click on this. And if you want to see the final result, double click on this. That's all. So here, this is the confusion matrix, and this is the final result. And see, this is the accuracy, precision, recall, and F measure. So here you are going to get accuracy, precision, recall, and F measure for a KNN classifier with 7030 dataset. Now you can perform the same with respect to GLCM and SVM. And one more assignment can be taken as part of your FDP program. The assignment could be here whatever I am given is for the data set consisting of only 3 classes. You can adapt the same. You can adapt the same for 101 classes or 256 classes. I will share you the link where you can get the data set. Hello, Professor. Hello.
Hi, sir.
So I'm sharing the link. Where I can share that link?
Or else you can email to me, sir. I can share it on the WhatsApp group.
Okay. Anyway, I will put it in chat measure so that.
You share it in chat window.
Okay. I think if everyone have done their work or done their classification, it is open for the question now.
Yeah, participants. So far, if you have any questions related to hands-on session or any doubts that you want to post to the speaker, you can put it on the chat window. I'll convey to the speaker. So there's one question: what is meant by F measure?
Okay. Yeah, I will clarify this out actually. Actually, F measure is nothing but it's a harmonic mean of precision and a recall. So before getting into the F measure, one has to clearly know what is actually precision and what is actually a recall. That means the precision is nothing but what is the total? It's a ratio of total number of samples correctly classified to the ratio of what actually the samples used for the classification. So that will give you a precision. That means how precise you are in answering the question. Like for example, if I give you an analogy, like a person who is practicing archery, a person who is practicing an archery, so there will be, I think many of us knows that the target, one has to hit the target, but a person there will be two person, one person used to hit different region apart from the target. That means out of 10, so 8 target will be used to hit away from the target, but the other person used to hit in and around the target randomly. But you want, how can you judge who is better? How can you judge who is better? Means in my mind, I will say that the person who hits the target away from the target, but 8 out of 10 is hitting correctly in the same region. That means he is more precise, rather than the target might be different, but the region of his interest is quite clear that he is hitting the same region. That means the target can be shifted from one place to another, so that his hitting region will be changed. That means he is more precise into his target, but the person who is hitting near or away from the target, you can't, the precision is very low. That means the precision tells you that the total number of samples correctly classified to the sample with which correctly used for the classification. But how about the recall? The recall is nothing but the total, there is a ratio, again it's a ratio of correctly classified to the total number of expected number of samples for the classification. Recalling ability is nothing but it can be measured even for children during their examination. That means given us the 12 questions, we ask them to write 10 answer any 10 out of 12 questions. The recalling ability of the children or a child is in such a way that he will be able to write all the 12 questions. That means his recalling ability is very high. But what is his precision ability? Out of 12 questions, how many questions are correct? That means anyway, if a person or if a child have the recalling ability in writing all the 12 questions, but out of 12 questions only 4 is correct. But a person or a child who has got very high precise, he or she writes only 8 questions, but out of 8 questions, he or she has got correct answer for all the 8 questions. That means 8 out of 8. That means the precision is very high at that time. Though the recall ability is not high, that is 8 out of 12, that is recalling ability is expected is 12. Expected is 12, but he or she writes 8. But some other child will write 4 for writing all the 12 questions, but out of 12 questions, only 4 questions are correct. That means 4 out of 12. That means the recalling ability of a child is very high, but the precision ability is very low. But the other when it comes to other child, the precision ability is very high, but the recall ability is very low. That's why one can say that this is a complementary. In real time, it is precision and recall is very complement to each other. But when it comes to a machine, so both should be very high. That means precision and recall should be supplemented to each other. But in a real scenario, we can't expect this to be happening. Now, why we go for introduction of F measure? Because to evaluate any model or method, we end up in getting both two different measures called precision and recall. But one cannot decide based on either precision or recall. Then we need a single measure to evaluate a given model. So keeping in mind, researchers have thought of concluding or getting with the use of harmonic mean, computing the harmonic mean for precision and recall and getting up a single evaluation score. Where that evaluation score reaches to 100, then you can say the system is very good in performing even at the negative imbalanced data set scenario. And even if F measure is reaching to 0, then you can say, or one can say that machine is not performing good. I think, Professor, I have clarified that out.
Yeah, sir. I'll just combine two questions.
Yeah.
Okay. What is confusion matrix?
Okay.
What does that it convey? And how
Okay.
can you reduce the error in confusion matrix?
Okay, confusion matrix. They wanted to know what do you mean by confusion matrix. Actually,
Yeah.
confusion matrix is a kind of a matrix where we can define it as a confusion occurs during classification. I have a classifier. While performing a classification, if I end up in getting a confusion while saying that it is a pencil or a pen, so my mind is having a confusion, little bit of confusion, because I have a 3 different classes, that is aeroplane, anchor, and a camera. When I get into the making decision whether the given object belongs to a camera or anchor or a aeroplane, I have in a bit confusion. But based on my intuition, I can say this as a camera, and original actual label of the same object will be a camera. Then the original label and the predicted label will be matching. Then I can put it in the first column. So I can show you here the confusion matrix here. One can see a confusion matrix. It is always the total number of rows is equal to the total number of columns. Here it consisting of 3 rows, because these 3 rows indicates the number of classes, and these 3 columns indicates the number of classes, and the row indicates the actual labels, that is total actual labels, and column indicates the predicted label. That means here one can see here the 238 indicates that out of 240, if you can sum here, if you can sum this row, that will give you the total number of samples used for testing for class 1. This row indicates class 1, this row indicates class 2, this row indicates class 3, and this column indicates predicted labels of class 1, this column indicates predicted labels of class 2, this column indicates predicted labels of class 3. Now if I go here, out of 240 samples, my system says 238 samples as class 1 and remaining 2 samples predicted as class 1 and predicted as class 3. So this is with respect to class 1. So when it comes to class 2, so here my system says out of 13 samples, my system says correctly 10 samples as class 2 because original samples is coming from class 2 and predicted is also class 2. But some few samples like 3 samples is predicting as class 1. So this is what we call it as confusion matrix, where it consisting of true positive, true negative, false positive and a true negative. That means what we can call it as, this is called as a true positive. That means consider have a positive class and a negative class. That means positive class means here the row indicates aeroplane and the column corresponds to a predicted class. The predicted class is nothing but a aeroplane. Here the sample is coming from a aeroplane and the prediction is also a aeroplane. That means it is positive only. That means the decision is true. Hence it is called as true positive. And these two are called as false negative. That means these are a class which is not part of a aeroplane, hence it is a negative class. That means these class are not belongs to a positive. Here my positive class is nothing but in first row, my positive class is always aeroplane. The negative class is always the complement of the aeroplane class. So these two are the negative class. Okay, but my system is saying this as these two samples as a negative. But the decision, whatever the decision, is it a right decision? It's not a right decision. Hence we call it as a false negative. But when it comes to here, that means here the second row, here the positive class is nothing but anchor. The negative class are nothing but a complement of the anchor. So here this is called as a true positive. This is called as a true positive and these are called as a false negative. And these are the different components of a confusion matrix which helps you in computing the precision, recall and a F measure.
Okay, I think that has clarified the doubt, sir. So are you ready to take some 1 or 2 questions, sir?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
There's one more question, like, which classifier is efficient for real-time object detection?
For real-time object detection.
Object detection.
Yeah, that depends on the data with which they are using. Actually, what I said is the object detection application what they are planning to design, that completely depends on the data available in their repository and the data with which they are going to do analysis. Like for example, here I have shown the data set which has got 3 different classes, where first class has got a huge number of samples relatively higher compared to the remaining set of classes. That is, the anchor class has got more samples compared to camera class and the aeroplane class has got more samples compared to the anchor class and a camera class. Similarly, if they have a data set or a corpus which has got samples common across, that is sufficiently balanced kind of set of the data set, they can go with if they are really want to achieve a good result, they can go with the deep learning architecture, YOLO kind of things, YOLO or SSD for object detection.
Yes, sir. So next question, like, how to improve the classification efficiency in KNN?
Efficiency or effectiveness?
I think they asked only efficiency.
Efficiency is nothing but it's a time. Actually, the major limitations of KNN is nothing but there is nothing like a training in the case of KNN classifier, because when it comes KNN classification, it computes. If I have a testing vector, it computes the comparison that is Euclidean distance from a testing vector to all the training vector available in the knowledge base. So hence, compared to SVM, it will take definitely a lot amount of time when you have a huge corpus of data. So you can avoid by performing a cluster and taking the cluster representative and only saving those cluster representative in the repository, such that that will reduce the time of the KNN classifier. Like, for what I mean is, instead of storing all the samples of the classes, so just take a class representative by performing a clustering and save only those cluster representative in the database and just match against only those cluster representative and perform classification. That will give you a more efficiency compared to what actually a KNN classifier.
So the last question for the session, sir.
Okay.
How is GLCM useful?
In what terms? In what sense? I mean,
Maybe I think the question is simply how is GLCM useful? Maybe they wanted to ask like maybe in terms of feature extraction out of the method.
actually, I wanted to clear that GLCM is something like gray level co-occurrence matrix. Like, it's a kind of a matrix wherein which we find for a pairing. Like, I have a matrix. I think image is nothing but whenever it comes to the digital computer, so it will be in the form of a matrix, where the image is represented in the form of either 3-dimension or 2-dimension. If it is grayscale, it is 2-dimension, or if it's a color image, it has got with the 3 different channels, that is R, G, and B. So if I consider only grayscale, it is with only a single channel image. So entire image is represented in the form of a matrix, where each cell in a matrix is considered as a pixel. That pixel is represented in the form of a grayscale value from between 0 to 255. If it is a 8-bit represented image, then it will be represented in the form of a 0 to 255 scale. Now the task of GLCM is to find out the pair, that is between the intensity value, that is 0 to 255. I have a value from 0 to 255 in a given image, or in a given image matrix. I will find out the position where I have 0 to 0, 0 paired with 0, 0 paired with 1, 0 paired with 2, and 1 paired with 1, 1 paired with 2, 2 paired with 3, and I just take down all the counts, frequency count of it, and I plot the histogram. And this is how the GLCM works while preserving the features present in the given image. The name itself say you that it's a gray level co-occurrence matrix. The co-occurrence is nothing but I have a pair of a pixel level, and I'm finding out those pairs in a given image, and I'm keeping track of their frequency.
Okay, sir. I think that has clarified their doubt. I think we come to the end of the session. Any more demos you have, sir? Or
Yeah,
okay.
nothing. This is the end of it.
Ah,
I think I shared the assignment with the participant that they have to enhance or adapt the same algorithm for classifying a 101 data set can be shared and across the organizers.
okay, sir. To the participant, I had shared the link on the chat window. Please give your feedback for this current session. Once again, thank you all the participants. Sir, it's really supposed to be a good informative session. So you have exposed us to the relevant tools or being used over the industry related to feature extractions, because feature extraction is supposed to be the first step towards computer vision. Different feature extraction methods, different tools, you have acquainted us with all the information, and along with this uh, demo, so people have thoroughly have understood the subject. So we are very grateful to you for accepting our invitation and being a part of a speaker. So you have conveyed a lots of information. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your good presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Velu, and thank you, Professor Ramya ma'am, for being given me an opportunity to deliver my experience or little bit of experience on computer vision and related aspects. And also, I would like to thank our mentor, Madam Punita, for giving me an opportunity for being a part of this 1 week FTP program. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.